Now I'm very excited to welcome back Mr. Paul Stone from Paul Stone Sports in Veasan. You can follow Paul on Twitter or X at Paul Stone Sports. Paul, man, deadlocked here. Bowl season's upon us. How the heck you doing out in Texas?
Doing well. I tell you, it's a busy time of year. We were talking, both of us being not only college football handicappers, but we handicap other sports. And I've handicapped college basketball from the beginning of the season, which was the first Friday in November, until the end in early April. So we have this overlap right now. And as professional handicappers for guys like you and myself, it's always busy, but it's even busier right now. That's kind of my busiest time of the year, but it's a great time of the year too, and blessed to be able to do what we do.
Absolutely, it's so fun and fun to watch. And yes, we do get up early in the morning. We discussed we're early rising gentlemen, so we like to get up and get after these lines nice and early, and that's a good thing. It gives you options as things move in your direction. So I love that, man. But this one, we'll talk. I cannot wait to talk more about college basketball, and hopefully we can get you back for that. But right now, it's all about college football and the bowls and everything going on. And I follow you on Twitter, and I love some of the stuff you be putting out there. But let's kind of start with the basics here. What about the seeding? Any? Do you have any issues with the committee and what they brought in for playoffs and how they are seeded?
It was a razor thin call on the Alabama or SMU to take the final spot in the field. And, everybody bashes the committee, and it's a tough job. I can certainly take my shots at them because I take some exception to some of their decisions and their process, but it is a difficult job. And I think we all knew coming in our heart of hearts that it was going to be difficult no matter how it turned out and no matter what decisions they were left with. It's a tough call, but I would have taken Alabama over SMU personally. It was razor thin. I'm a Texas guy, so I love SMU. If I'd have had more ammunition in the pockets, I would have maybe gone to SMU, but it's an expensive private school. So, and they maybe would have looked at my transcript. So that could have hurt my effort there as well. But certainly I have an affinity for SMU, but I would have probably taken Alabama just based on, strength of schedule. But I think really and truly, I think the committee recognizes they would never admit it, but there wasn't a whole lot of an SEC presence on there. It seemed like it was more Big Ten backgrounds, for whatever that's worth. And secondly, I think people have SEC fatigue. I think many people think the SEC is overrated and that they've had their fair share. So let's give somebody else a shot. But I will say this: if SMU, in my mind anyway, you never know what their conversations were in the committee ballroom there in Grapevine, Texas. But SMU falls behind by 17 points. I think they were trailing still by 17 at the half. If they don't rally and tie that game at 31 and get beat on that final play, 56-yard field goal, just get beat by 3 points. If they don't show that fight, if they don't come back and they get beat by 10 or double digits, I think Alabama's in. I think the committee, from their standpoint, they're always looking for, again, they might not articulate this, but how could we explain it? How can we explain our decisions? And I think you can say, hey, SMU got beat by BYU at home early, and they had their chance against a Clemson team that wasn't all that super, and they, got beat by double digits. So Alabama, gets the spot. So had a little bit of exception with that. And then probably my bigger exception was Boise State's seeding. I think they got a lot of mileage, and deservedly so, from their 3-point loss in week 2 at Austin Stadium to Oregon, a game they could have won for sure. And Oregon's the best team in the country. They're number 1. They're the top seed. I believe they deserve that. But, the week before, Boise lost by 3 points to Oregon. FCS Idaho played Oregon in their season opener, and Oregon led Idaho 17-14 late in the game. Only won that game 24-14. So the rendition of the Ducks we're seeing today, I think they've come a long way. And by the way, that Idaho team, their season was ended in the FCS quarterfinals last weekend, but Montana State 52, Idaho 19.
Montana State. I got a buddy that went to Montana State, and he wants to watch the game with me on the 21st. I'm like, hell yeah, I want to watch the game. You throw me a college football game, you want to watch it, I'm going to watch it with you, my friend. So at FCS, it don't matter. I'm excited.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I probably should have carried that just a little bit further. Boise being seated as high as they are and getting the bye over not only, first of all, Arizona State and even Clemson, but they look at that, they look at that one in Boise State's right side of their ledger, and then they look at the two in Arizona State. So I think they're weighing way too much the record, which records are important, but strength of schedule is not given enough weight, in my opinion. I always like to say to people, it's not always how you play, it's who you play. And, like I equate it to our neighborhoods when we're growing up. If I stayed in my little neighborhood and, got in a wrestling match or a boxing match with little Johnny and Timmy and all these other boys, I could probably slap them around a little bit. But if I crossed the tracks and went into another conference, I might not be so tough. So, these schedules are disparate and the strengths of schedules range wildly. So, but I thought they did a pretty good job. It's a tough job.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's funny. Strength schedule is kind of in the eye of the beholder. What if we're all wrong and all our power ratings are wrong on the SEC? There's all kinds of things to say. The truth is, I have Alabama's a top 10 team. I mean, if you went by power ratings, yeah, they never go by power ratings, but I think parameters would be nice to say, maybe you had a rule that says no 3 losses for the conference, and then Alabama would have been out in that standpoint, because you can't make it an SEC invitational at the same time. To be like, I'm sorry if your ceiling's so high and you can beat any of these teams in here, but your floor is so low because you lost 3 points to Oklahoma. And that's kind of, you got to weigh that a little bit. It's hard to bet Alabama in a way. It's almost like, as a sports bettor, I've been fortunate to fade them when they lost some of those games, but Vanderbilt in particular. But, it's kind of like Milroe is good enough to beat any of these teams, and yet they have the floor that's so bad that, if they play defense correctly against him and he's having a bad game, and they can look pretty average. And I think that the committee thought about that. And what's so funny about SMU, I wanted SMU in. They had a lot of work to get back into that game. And I think you are right that if they would have had that 17-point loss or 14 points or 10 plus, they probably would have not been in. But that also would have contradicted a lot of things that the committee said in the past, saying that if you make it to the conference championship, we're not going to punish you. And then all of a sudden, during the interview, the guy's like, well, we're going to look at it. It kind of tells you a little bit that Bama certainly had a path in. But I think the ACC definitely played their hand right in the way that worked out for the ACC, and the fact that Florida State got held out last year and then had to play Georgia on a skeleton crew of nobodies in their bowl game was just a kick in the pants, my man. Almost feel bad. I felt really bad for the ACC last year, so it's kind of like this is their revenge. But of course, the SEC is the one that's getting hurt right now, because if Indiana or even Penn State play that schedule that Alabama did, I could see 3-4 losses for sure, on their resumes as well. But, that's what you get when you have a super conference. It's like, if you're going to have a super conference, you can't expect to get everybody in. This is the college football playoffs. At least we got 3 very good representatives from the SEC. My biggest problem is Ohio State in Oregon's side of the bracket, Paul. I think that anybody that knows college football knows that Ohio State's a top 3 team, top 4 team, whatever you want to say. That should not be punishing Oregon right there. They should have flipped Penn State to Oregon's position right there, especially kind of how rough Georgia finished, and then Georgia had the quarterback issue, and then now you give them that side of the bracket. It makes no sense. I think they did favor the SEC by putting Texas on one side and putting Georgia on the other, Paul.
Yeah, I definitely think that Oregon, to be the top seed, they sure did get a funny draw there. And I think clearly with some of the conversations you see from some of the big media types at ESPN and other places, even guys like you and I think the committee is certainly going to revisit the bracket, the way these things are seeded. Texas has a Texas got, as some people have said, the coveted 5 seed. They're in. They really have. They have to play an extra game, obviously, but they have an easier road than Oregon. I mean, they get Arizona State if they if they beat Clemson, which is not a given. But Texas gets Arizona State at a neutral site, which Arizona State's not going to come in there and lay down, and they will be well rested. But they don't have to play Ohio State or anybody like that you would expect they might have to. So yeah, they need to clean that bracket up and make the seedings better reflect the body of work that the teams enter the tournament with. And Oregon being undefeated in the top seed, they shouldn't be in the leg of the bracket that they are.
What's funny? Is it a neutral site in Alabama or in Georgia at the Mercedes-Benz at the Peach Bowl? I think you're going to get more Texas fans there than you're going to get ASU fans. I think I'm going to give Texas, if Texas obviously takes care of Clemson, which I expect. I'm going to give Texas probably at least 1 or 2 points of home field advantage in that situation. But I will tell you that it does suck for ASU that they lost their number 1 receiver like that, and they really got through that whole mess. And that kind of leads into my next question. I am actually happy the committee did give them the bye. They deserve that over SMU and Clemson. I'm very happy they did that. But do you have any issue with the awards being given out? I saw a few tweets of yours that you made some pretty good cases.
Well, the awards, Travis Hunter being the Heisman Trophy, I could see. I know a lot of people. I think a lot of people that are, and this is just speculation and theory on my part, but I think a lot of people that are disappointed with the Travis Hunter selection as the Heisman Trophy winner, which there are quite a few people disappointed with it. They would have rather seen Ashton Jeanty, who's a Texan. So I like, I like guys from Texas. He's from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I have no qualms with it. But I think a lot of people that do, I think they have, I think Deion's kind of burned some bridges. I think he's rubbed some people the wrong way. I think some of his players, maybe, they reflect the coach. And I think they're maybe viewed as kind of the bad guys a little bit. So I think that's a little bit of it. And that's just, again, a theory and just speculation. Ashton Jeanty, I used to be a sports writer, and I never had a vote in the Heisman Trophy, but a lot of guys I worked with and knew less about college football than I did have a vote and still have a vote in many cases. And some of these guys, and you've probably heard as much said, some of these guys that still have votes hadn't covered college football in years, but they're just on the roster and they get to vote every year. And some of them, they watch, their granddaughter's recitals more than they watch college football games. And it's really at that point, they need to clean up. They need to lessen the number of people. I know they want a broad representation of all regions of the country and a lot of people voting, to be sure it's not skewed to one candidate or another, but they need to clean the voting rolls up. But I think what hurt Ashton Jeanty in final summation, this is just my gut feelings, the fact he played the Mountain West Conference. He had a big game against Oregon without question, but I think the level of competition got him a little bit, averaged less than 4 yards a carry in the first meeting against UNLV. I mean, I think he had to basically bat 1,000 probably to overcome Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter is such a unique candidate. The fact that he excels on both sides of the ball. I mean, he's a tremendous player. And to have that kind of, even for a guy who plays a skill position, obviously the guys, the defensive tackles and the offensive linemen, not going to play every play. But most guys, they've got to get rest. They've got to get a blow when they just play one side of the ball. And this guy's playing every darn play, basically. And it's just incredible. I think people who've never played, maybe never played or not that familiar with the game, normal people don't have that kind of stamina. Stamina to be out there standing. You're talking about stamina to play every play at the highest level. I mean, he rarely played at anything less than a high level. So I don't have a problem with that. The one that and this is a lesser award, but the Burlsworth Award, Brandon Burlsworth was a offensive lineman at University of Arkansas maybe 20 years ago. There was a walk-on. He wore black rim glasses. I don't know if you remember him, but he died in a car accident. So the Burlsworth Award, he was originally a walk-on at the University of Arkansas. So this goes to the top former walk-on. And I'm saying this just from the perspective of I haven't seen him play a lot, but Michael Taft at Texas was one of the nominees. The linebacker from Oregon got that award. But Michael Taft, not only his play on the field, he's just an incredible story. Obviously, a former walk-on to be one of the finalists for this award, but just a big-time hitter, a guy who doesn't seem to have the tools. He just looks like a little boy next door, and just a tremendous player at Texas and part of what I think is the nation's top defense. And just to be sure that I put this out here, Michael Taft for Texas will be he went to Austin Westlake High School on the west edge of Austin, and he'll be going up against one of his best friends and a co-member of the 2020 state champion Austin Westlake Chaparrals, the quarterback for Clemson, Cade Klubnik. So he's going to be trying to lay the wood on Cade Klubnik, and they're very close friends and became closer. They won the state championship in 2020, and they beat South Lake Carroll. Their quarterback's a guy named Quinn Ewers. So that was Ewers was one quarterback. Klubnik was the other, and Taft played with Klubnik there at Austin Westlake. But he'll be they blitz him a lot, so and he's a vicious hitter, so he's going to have to be hitting his best buddy, and they became very close during COVID because they had limited practices and so forth. But that would be, they'd spend a lot of time at each other's house and other people's house and stuff during that period of time. But I would like to see Michael Taft. I just can't imagine anybody better than him at the walk-on level. But that's kind of my feelings on the awards there.
I agree. I think the thing with Travis Hunter, I saw him get burned a few times at corner, but you got to understand he's playing both sides of the ball. I wonder if Deion Sanders wasn't the coach and Shedeur Sanders was a quarterback, if he still would have gotten an award. I think it's a very media-driven thing now. And then I think of like what MVP means and why is Cam Scattleboo not invited to this thing, man? I thought that ASU needed him so bad to get those wins, and I really believe that he was the reason. And no disrespect to Levitt, the quarterback there, who was awesome this year, and Kenny Dillingham, which you made a great point about for possibly being the coach of the year over Cignetti, which I agree too. I think it sucks that Scattleboo wasn't invited. Now here's my problem: they all deserve it. I don't know, I think they all deserve it. It's just it's hard to give it to one person, and I always root for the little guy, so I personally would have voted for Scattleboo. You'd see like 2 votes or something. One of them would have been mine for Cam Scattleboo, because I really think that he meant more to that team than maybe Travis Hunter would have meant to Colorado. And I could be wrong. I mean, like I said, Hunter was a unicorn, like you said too, and Genty was an absolute beast too. It was just tough. But I liked your argument what you said about Dillingham comparing him to Cignetti, but I have the same problem. I think they both deserve it. One has 1 loss, the other has 2 losses. They both made the playoffs, but I think that Dillingham, you can make a great argument that he should have been coach of the year, Paul.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That was going to be one of I just kind of slipped my mind, but Kirk Cignetti got a boost from that media blitz at midseason when they went to Columbus and played Ohio State. And of course they got dominated by the Buckeyes, but he's got a big personality. He's kind of got that cockiness and that flair that people like. And I think his case for coach of the year was bolstered significantly by all that media coverage that Indiana got around midseason. Deserved media recognition, but his case was bolstered. I think Arizona State, what Kenny Dillingham inherited there in Tempe, left behind by Herm Edwards, the sanctions and so forth, was a very difficult situation. You've got an Arizona State team. A lot of people don't like to hear this, and I know you're from you indicate you're a Wisconsin fan and may be from that area, but the Big 12, according to Jeff Sagarin, and his rankings are based, his conference rankings give the midpoint quite a bit of emphasis. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it's basically the average power rating of each team in the conference divided by the number of teams is, I think, a pretty fair way to explain it. The Big 12 this year was slightly stronger than the Big 10, according to Sagarin, just by a minuscule margin, despite the top heaviness of the Big 10, which is obviously much deeper at the top than the Big 12. But in the Big 12, you got to play losable games every week, basically. In the Big Ten,
Yeah.
you don't have to play losable games every week. You could lose, sure, but they're not nearly the caliber of that second half, bottom half of the Big 12. In Arizona State and media days in Las Vegas in July, 16 teams in the Big 12, and Arizona State, the media picked them 16th. So for him to be picked 16th in the preseason media poll by those who cover the league, and then to come in and do what he did, I think you can only give it to one. I mean, there's always going to be multiple deserving candidates because there's always going to be superlative performances. But I think Kenny Dillingham deserves that award or deserved it. And I think there's still maybe a couple of Coach of the Year awards out there, and hopefully maybe he'll get one of them. But what a job he's done there for Arizona State.
He will get his payday at least. And looking at the top 35, there's a ton of Big 12 teams. You can even say the top 25. You got Baylor right there, right? Iowa State's number 27. 28 is BYU. Oh, there is a ton of Big 12 teams in this thing. And I actually think that Baylor, believe it or not, which I took 60-1 to win the conference before the season, might be the best Big 12 team right now. And so that is an interesting thought that I've always had. I just thought that they choked away some games, including that Hail Mary against Colorado. Let's get into some games, man. We can talk about this great stuff forever about, who should be in and who should be out, awards and all that fun stuff. But I know your focus is going to be the playoffs, but I want to quick cover the two bowls here on the 20th before that. And you have the Staff DNA Cure Bowl, Ohio versus Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State's +3. The total is 54.5. You look at the transfer portal, you got some guys from Jacksonville State in there, starting safety, starting outside linebackers, starting cornerbacks. But last year they didn't play in the game. So I wonder if that's a Rich Rod thing. I wonder if Rich Rod's got one foot out the door. Ohio's motivation. What's funny about this bowl in itself is that both of these teams won their conferences. So I always like to fade the team that won their conference. I mean, in general, of course, it's always number dependent, Paul, but they both won. So they're playing each other. It's just kind of like, I just hope they enjoy themselves on vacation here. Net yards per play, Ohio gets it by 0.34. Coaching bowl ATS, you don't got nothing for Brian Smith, who's the interim for Ohio. And Jacksonville State, Rich Rod is only 2 for 10 in bowl games. This guy does not seem to care too much about bowl games. I think this is a fair line, but I do lean the over because Jacksonville State, even though they're a big running team, they tend to go under or over a lot. But I will say Ohio's defense in yards per rush ranks 10th in the nation, allowing only 3.1. But this is going to be an interesting game, and I think a lot of these early games kind of go over because there's less of a defensive appeal to these teams trying to stop anybody. It's kind of almost like a NBA All-Star game feel a little bit sometimes on these early ones. So that's my thought on that one. Any quick thoughts on this one?
Well, Rich Rod's out the door. I'll say that. Rod Smith, their offensive coordinator, will be Jacksonville State's coach, and he got named interim coach, I believe. So, okay. he won't be there. If what I read, and this just came out, probably earlier today. We talk about getting up early. Sometimes I can't remember when if it's yesterday or today or what I ate for lunch or whatever. But in the last 24 hours, I think I read somewhere that Rich Rod wouldn't coach the bowl game and that Rod Smith, their offensive coordinator, would be the interim coach.
He's at West Virginia now, sounds like.
Rod. He took the head coaching job there at West Virginia, went back to Morgantown. So he's
I see that now. I wrote this up yesterday morning or the night before. So that's
I know how it goes. There's just there's so much, especially now with the transfer portal and the coaching changes. It's just it's just impossible there's so many moving parts to it. But this game to me is, unfortunately, as much as I like to try to take advantage of chaos and confusion, because I think it's the friend of the hardworking handicapper. Sometimes in these bowl games, especially these non-New Year's Six and the non-playoff ones, it's just hard to get a gauge for who's going to be playing, and who's going to be coaching and so forth. And with Jacksonville State's situation with Rodriguez, no longer there, and things kind of in flux. And on top of that, Ohio they really looked good to me against Miami of Ohio in the MAC championship game. They were dominant. I actually had Miami in that game, so kind of stung a little bit, but I was just floored at how well they played and how easily they disposed of the Red Hawks. So they were very, very impressive in that bowl game. So I guess my lean would be to Ohio in that December 20th bowl.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Now that Rich Rod's out, and I look to the over. I think it's funny you got both interim coaches here. It's just one of those situations that college football needs to fix. I wanted to talk to you about that, but I think we can both agree the transfer portal needs to be put in way later than it is. The academics is always the second thought, but they can still stay at their school and finish the spring semester, and start in the summer is what I say. So who cares about the spring ball? It's only the fans of that actual team cares about that as much. So I think that this is a massive problem that I'd love to get past, because it's really messing me up and it's taking me a lot of my time, in these situations. But no disagreement here. I don't have a side in this one, and I could see Ohio doing really well. And yeah, I was luckily on Ohio during that game against Miami, just by the way they finished the season. But I was worried about that one, but they did kind of come through for me on that one. It's funny, Rich Rod, I remember when he was coaching for West Virginia that he went to Michigan afterwards, and how badly that went, Paul. It was just a crazy time, him back going to Michigan in college football, and it almost really hurt his career.
Yeah, it just goes to show, these fans in college football, they are starved for a winner. It doesn't matter if you're West Virginia or wherever we're talking about. And, they'll forgive and forget if they think he gives them a better chance to be successful. And, I think he said all the right things. Looking at his press conference, he said, I should have never left. And whether he meant it or not, I think you've got to handle it better than he handled it, his exit to Ann Arbor. But you're going to take the Michigan job, if you're at West Virginia, all things being equal, although West Virginia has one of the most passionate college football fan bases in all of college football. They're incredible. But yeah, it's a different ball game. But I think we can, just to touch quickly on the transfer portal issue. I mean, it's a major problem, not only for guys like us, but these bowl sponsors. They pay a lot of money to sponsor these bowls, and then they get these games where a lot of the most prominent players are not there, and the players are just in control. The paradigm has shifted over the last 10 years or so, and the reason that you have NIL and now starting, I guess, next season, the revenue sharing is either there was a lawsuit filed about 2010, and then the threat of more lawsuits. So they didn't. It's not like NCAA wanted to do it. I'm not saying that they weren't going to do it ever, but NIL was, they were fearing litigation, and somebody told them the inevitable: you're not going to win, in today's climate. So you have to make concessions, and it's just a mess. That's a podcast for another day. But transfer portal got to be moved back. I think right now it's 20 days. They need to shorten it maybe to 10 to 14. And they need to start at about January 4th or 5th after the
100%.
new year, and end at about the 15th before most people start school. If they're worried about them enrolling on time for the spring semester, might get off to a late start. But yeah, they got to push it back into early January, shorten it to 10 days, and go from there.
Yeah, I think they can still stay at school. Transfer via football status and just start in the summer. That's kind of like with the slight, you got this slight punishment for this, and maybe NIL, it goes to a fund that gets dispersed, and if you don't play in your postseason game, you get 30% punishment or something. I think you have to tie that in, otherwise why would we bother having these games? But hey, man, there's no perfect answer. Those are some of my early thoughts about trying to fix this horrible situation. Let's move on to the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl. Tulane versus Florida. Florida's minus 14, total 49.5. I took a bad number on this, Paul. I thought it was a good number at 13. Now it's all the way up to 14. I think that Florida's motivation is I put medium low. It's not like beating Tulane's going to help them that much, but at the same time, they finished the season well. They cashed my over 4.5 season win total nice and early, which was nice. And they're kind of feeling pretty good. I almost think that maybe they're happy with their coach over there, in Florida. I'm not 100% sure, but it's one of those things with Billy Napier. He doesn't show up for bowl games. He's only 0-4 ATS for bowls. John Summerall, young coach, 1-0 for Tulane there. He obviously coached Troy before that, but he had a lot of success for Tulane. The thing that worries me, well, obviously besides the transfer portal, because Tulane's quarterback Darian Mensah committed to Duke, right? And then a couple other guys did as well. Not a ton, though, but they also lost a backup. It sounds like Ty Thompson said he's going to play, though, at least. But he didn't do a lot there. He threw 11 passes, Florida has some injuries. Their top cornerback's out for the year. Their cornerback 2, Devin Moore, hasn't played since week 10. I expect more guys getting out of Florida. They have a tight end transferring. They have a defensive line transferring and Jack Pyburn. Tulane's got a better yards per play, but the strength of schedule really goes to Florida. My problem is, can Tulane stop the run because they couldn't stop Armies? Is Florida going to run all over them? That's my question. I still think Tulane should be good enough to cover 14 points, so I'm sticking with my play. I'm playing Tulane plus the 14, mainly because, Bailey Napier is still 0-4 against the spread in the bowl games. Paul.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion here, but like you, I tend to gravitate towards taking the double-digit dogs in the bowl games, especially when it's a school from a so-called, smaller, less prominent conference. Not that the American Athletic Conference is a smaller conference, but it's certainly not the Southeastern Conference. So for them to be playing Florida is a bigger deal to them than Florida to be playing Tulane, and here they are getting double digits. I am a little bit concerned. Ty Thompson, he's a former 5-star recruit that signed with Oregon out of high school, a big-time recruit there, and he's never panned out. He can run and he's athletic, but he's not much in the passing game. So you'll see a great athlete because he'll come out of the pocket and run it. But I worry about I worry a little bit about Tulane's ability to muster offense. But like you said, Florida's got a lot of Pyburn and some of the others. They got some people in the portal and got some other potential opt-out situations. So, for me, I can see where you're coming from there. It would be Tulane or nothing. I certainly couldn't take Florida laying 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, Florida finished well, but Tulane was still a pretty good competitor. A month or so ago, people were talking like maybe they would get in over Boise State. Obviously didn't happen. But that's a really interesting thought. Let's talk about playoffs, my man. First game, Indiana, number 10, at Notre Dame, number 7. Notre Dame's favored by 7.5 points, totals 51. This is at Notre Dame Stadium in South Bend, Indiana. This is 2 teams from Indiana. Paul, why don't you break this one down for us?
Yeah, coming up on Friday night, the 20th, you've got an Indiana team that was kind of the darling of the college football season. It's just been a historic season for the Hoosiers, their first 10-win season in school history. And now they're facing kind of the brand of not only one of the major brands, now the true blue bloods of all time in college football, Notre Dame, but an in-state rival. I like Notre Dame here. This is a Notre Dame team that is a 28-point favorite, was shocked by Northern Illinois in week 2. But since that loss, they've won 10 straight by 30.7 points per game. Only one of those wins in the 10-game winning streak, current 10-game winning streak, by fewer than 2 touchdowns. Riley Leonard, their quarterback, who's had some injury issues throughout his career, is healthy, playing well, gaining confidence in his first year with the Irish. Jeremiah Love, the running back, he's closing in on 1,000 yards. He's really developed nicely in their defense, one of the best in the country. Indiana's only game this year on the big stage against Ohio State. I think it's fair to say they failed miserably. The last 3 quarters, they looked totally out of their element, got beat 38-15. But I think Notre Dame, I know Cignetti, Coach Cignetti at Indiana said the right things, that we were overwhelmed by the noise. We were unprepared for some of the stuff. We'll do better this time. But I'm going to, until I see it, I kind of expect to see more of the same on the big stage from the Hoosiers. I don't think Gene Hackman's walking through that door Friday night.
Gene
I'll take
Hackman, come
Notre
on.
Dame minus the points.
All right, you're taking the 7.5. I wonder if this gets down to 7. The funny thing is the numbers say Indiana is right with Notre Dame almost. I mean, Indiana's got a 0.35 net yards per play. But here's the thing. If your belief is the Big Ten under the top 3-4 teams is soft, which a lot of people believe, then you're probably looking a little bit more towards Notre Dame because the stats say that Indiana could be in this game. But you saw it once already. I wonder if they get over that hump and kind of think to themselves, all right, well, we faced Ohio State. Let's kind of build up. But the problem is you're going to still have a big home field advantage for Notre Dame. Even though it's in Indiana, they're probably going to let, 5,000 Indiana fans in, maybe something like that. I don't know the numbers of the allotments in this situation. It's probably going to be more than a regular season game. But there's still going to be a lot of screaming Irish fans out there, which is very tough. How about this next one? We got Saturday, December 21st, number 11 SMU at number 6 Penn State. Penn State's laying 8.5. The total is 53.5 in Beaver Stadium, State College, Pennsylvania, on TNT. I'm telling you, I'm getting Penn State 3.5 for home field advantage. Thank God it's not a whiteout because I'd have to give them like 5.5 for home field advantage. If it was a night game, I think they're just still going to wear white, though, from what I'm hearing. But maybe you have a play on this one for us.
This is one of the games I do like Notre Dame, and there's some 7 out there too in the marketplace just looking on Notre Dame. So, certainly if you're going to take the Irish.
Penn State, you mean?
Well, I was talking about I was just saying, we were talking about the 7.5. I was just saying there is some 7 available looking backwards.
Oh, right. Oh,
Notre
gotcha.
Dame
Sorry, my
7
fault.
if you take the favorite. But in this game, I really I just don't have a strong feeling. One thing I think that could hurt SMU is the fact it could be a literal whiteout on the ground. It's going to be very cold. There's going to be some snow apparently on Friday. Could bleed into Saturday. It's going to be high in the 20s with some wind. Again, it could snow, so it's not really what the guys from Texas are going to be used to, and that would certainly play into Penn State's favor there. And SMU, they played good defense this year, but they certainly hadn't faced a running back tandem like Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. So I worry about that a little bit. But then on SMU's side, they've really had a magical season. Their quarterback, Kevin Jennings, which a lot of people maybe haven't seen extensively this year, he is just kind of a magician. He's a great athlete. He just kind of has that it factor. So be interesting to see, though, what this SMU rush defense, this average, giving up less than 100 yards on the ground, giving up less than 3 yards per carry. Be interesting to see how they match up against Singleton, Allen, and company for Penn State.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. I like SMU. I think that this game has the most let's just say out of all the 7.5 point favorites, you throw those 3 together, you got the Tennessee, you got, SMU, and you got Indiana. I think SMU's got the best chance to win this game outright. And there's some reasons for this. And first of all, the way that ACC championship game couldn't have went better for Clemson. Not one flag was thrown for Clemson that whole game. Almost like the ACC played their cards pretty well in that situation. The best thing that could have happened for the ACC is what exactly happened in that championship game right there. Now, I know, that Dabo Sweeney's going to have these kids buttoned up like he did, but I think that was a special comeback for SMU, even though they didn't win the game. I was wondering if they were going to go for 2 there. I was like, man, do you go for 2 right there? Maybe finish this thing out right there. Sometimes we got the momentum, but I think that there's a couple things going against Penn State. For one, it's big game James Franklin, who's not a big game coach. He actually loses all his big game. Against top 5 schools, he's 0-12. I think his record's still pretty bad against top 25 or top 15. I don't have the numbers in front of me exactly. I had them the other day. But Penn State has a slight net yards per play advantage of 0.44. Both teams are pretty healthy, obviously, coming in. I think you don't get this far unless you're pretty healthy in this situation. But, Penn State's got a small strength of schedule advantage, 44th to 61st. But this goes back to, do you believe the Big Ten, the teams that Penn State played, who they avoided Oregon, they avoided Indiana, they got Ohio State at home, and They couldn't cover their own spread there. SMU's an interesting team, and I like teams with offense for backdoor capabilities. You're looking at 8.5 points here. A guy like Jennings, Kevin Jennings, that quarterback, he can backdoor people. And I think Penn State could be that candidate that they're backdooring just because he's a dual threat quarterback. And I think that's where Penn State can struggle, is against a dual threat quarterback in this situation. The defense is tough, but they're much better against pocket passers rather than dual threat situations. The thing is the explosive plays, I think, is going to be huge for SMU. What's funny is that they have a low success rate on offense, ranking 52nd, but explosiveness, 8th. That's why Penn State's defense tends to struggle. Their explosive play rating on defense is 87th. So if this spread's going to be up to the quarterback, Kevin Jennings, in my opinion, I think he can get there. But if you're doing your survivors and stuff, you have to pick 3 of the games. This is one you either avoid, or I'm going to pick SMU. I have to pick 3 games in Survivor this week. I'm going to pick SMU, and I don't care if I lose because I want to win. So I think that this is a situation where they get ahead of Big Game James. I'm taking the 8.5 points, and I'm going to take a little small play on the money line, Paul, for plus 250.
Good deal. Yeah, that would be. One of these underdogs is going to win. So, like you said, it might be SMU.
Well, let's talk about a game up your alley: Clemson versus Texas. Texas minus 11, total 51. Texas, I've given them the full 3 for playing at Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium. I'm giving them 3 points. Maybe you know that they should get more or less. What are your thoughts on this big game for the SEC and ACC?
Yeah, I'm seeing right now kind of a consensus line. Texas favored by 11 with a total of 51.5. And I'm going to recommend a pair of correlated selections on this game on both the side and total. Going to go with underdog Clemson plus 11 and the under 51.5. And the reason for my primary reasons, there are many reasons, but the primary reason for my positions here is Texas's great defense, one, which I believe is the nation's best. I mean, they give up an average of 12.5 points per game, only 3.8 yards per play, just have elite NFL top talent at all 3 levels of defense. So Texas, very, very, very good defensively, but their offense, especially in the second half of the year, has just been kind of bogged down, especially in the red zone. They're averaging for the year less than 2 yards per carry in the red zone, which teams obviously are going to average less because it's more compact and the defense is tight, more tightly bunched and so forth. But Texas has just really struggled in the red zone offense. Their last 4 games in regulation, they've only averaged 21 points a game against Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and then Georgia in the SEC championship game. So I'm looking for it to be a tight game. This is not Dabo Swinney's best team. Is certainly not anywhere on a par with the teams of 5, 6, 7 years ago that were winning and contending for national championships. But it's still a good team. They've got 5-star guys, defensive tackle Peter Woods, linebacker Sammy Brown, still have some big-time performers. I think Clemson keeps this within single digits, lower scoring game. So Clemson plus 11, under 51.5.
All right. I think that Clemson is I think that Clemson is the biggest fraudulent team in these playoffs. And I think that even Boise State might be able to beat this team. Now, in saying that, do I want to lay 11 points? Not really. Steve Sarkisian's 2-4 in postseason play in bowl games, 2 wins, 4 losses against the spread. Dabo Swinney is 12-8. But Texas's defense is the best unit on the field. And you made a great point about how poor they've been in the red zone. Hell, we just saw it in the Georgia game, right? I think the fact that Ewers isn't dual threat hurts them in situations, and that I think this day and age, you want a dual threat quarterback. Clemson gets dominated, though, in offensive facets of the game. If you look at literally every single advanced stat, it really favors Texas. Texas also has a plus 1.38 net yards per play advantage on paper. Texas should be way better, but at the same time, Steve Sarkisian, big game spot. He's a little bit like James Franklin. The under is my favorite play, and I took it when it was early. I took it at 52.5 or 53. I'd take this down to 48, 47 points. In my opinion, I think this game goes way under the total. And there's a chance that Clemson's not going to score much, Paul. So I'm on your side for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I do have a little bit of reservation, and I agree with you. Clemson's not, they're not a team that's going to win 4 games and win the national championship. They don't have that kind of talent. But it's more a bet against Texas on the side, and then the total. Again, Texas's great defense and their struggles in the red zone on offense.
Well, they have a big game coach for Clemson, let's face it. But Dabo Swinney is a championship coach. So that's what worries you about if you're thinking about landing with Texas. I know we only got a minute or two left. Let's move to the last game, Tennessee, Ohio State. Ohio State minus 7.5, total 46.5. What do you have for us, Paul?
Yeah, this game, I don't have a great opinion on the side. I think the number in that 7.5, 8 range is right. But where I like this game is, again, on the total. You're going to have, again, cold weather, not really conducive perhaps to offensive fireworks. But kind of my primary reason for liking the under, there's some 47 out there. Mostly the market's painted 46.5. But I just think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think both these coaches, they know their quarterback's limitations. For Ohio State, first of all, we saw Will Howard against Michigan. He's now thrown 33 career interceptions, has an interception rate of 3%, which is extremely high for college football and certainly high for a championship level quarterback. So I think not only will Ohio State try to keep Howard out of harm's way, Nico, Tennessee's quarterback in the last most of the season for that matter, they've really not gone vertical much in the passing game with him. It's been conservative. It's been short range, mid-range throws. They've got a great running back in Dylan Sampson for Tennessee. And then, of course, Ohio State's got Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. So I think you're going to see just old black and blue football, both teams trying to win with ball control, running the football, playing tough defense because they're both 2 of the top 5 defenses in college football, and not turning the ball over. So I think we're going to see some conservatism, going to be cold. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. So I like the under 47 in Tennessee, Ohio State.
No, it makes total sense to me. And I don't have a play on the side either of this. I very much lean to the under. I think both defensive lines are going to have the advantage, especially with the injuries on Ohio State. And I know you got a roll. Do you have any plus money plays or beer bet bangers or anything out there? Because I got one to run by you in case you don't.
Well, I'll throw you one real quick. I do have to got an appointment, and I apologize. We talked about it beforehand because your show's it's really, I really enjoy being on you, and it's a lot of fun just talking things over like we're at the bar, maybe having a cup of coffee or maybe another cup or whatever, depending on your preference. But my bangers here, beer bet banger, is going to be in college basketball. Take a unit, whatever a unit is, and split it. So bet half on one of these recommendations, half on the other. And market wide will probably be similar, but college basketball to win the national championship, 2 real long shots. Grand Canyon, and there's a hedging component here. Grand Canyon at 200 to 1, McNeese State at 500 to 1. Available at the Westgate. If those teams make the tournament, either or both, I don't think they're going to be playing that play-in game in Dayton, Ohio. And you can take their opponent. You can kind of figure out how you want to hedge, but you can take their opponent each step of the way on the money line and say, hey, I bet $50 originally. I'm going to bet the opponent to win 100. And you're diluting that potential massive payout. But if they make the tournament, either or both, you're assuring yourself of a profit if you know how to properly hedge. So hopefully that makes sense to most of your listeners out there. You just hedge. If they survive and go to the next game, you take the opponent who will probably be favored on the money line, and you're going to be able to lock in a profit. They're not going to be huge underdogs, neither one of these teams, because they're good. So you're not going to be laying minus 1,500, right, taking the favorite against them. So it's not like you're putting a huge amount of money, on the line. So that's my beer bet banger. Hopefully that fell within the Rex there.
It did. It absolutely. It did by a lot because you got 200 to 1 and 500 to 1, and you remember Grand Canyon made it to I believe the Elite 8 last year. Should have beat Alabama in that game, and so that was right up my alley. I love TCU, the Lopes, man. I'm excited to go to another game this year and watch a little GCU basketball. And Miss McNeese, last year I called them the Bees Knees, McNeese State. So I didn't get to watch much of them yet this year. I'm really looking forward to that. My beer bet banger is I'm taking, says most likely game to go with the highest scoring game. Because I like the unders that we both talked about, I went plus 260 on Notre Dame, Indiana. I think, you can maybe think that SMU Penn State has a chance, but I think Notre Dame, Indiana has a chance at plus 260. It's one of some of the best odds that I could find for them to go have with the highest total in this football matchup this weekend for the college football playoffs. So out of the 4 games, that's what I think, Paul, and plus 260 ain't too bad.
Not at all. No, that's a good ticket, and I'll keep that in mind and be rooting for you.
Well, where could our listeners get your wonderful information and plays?
Yeah, I tell you, first of all, I try to be active on Twitter or X. My handle at Paul Stone Sports. And if anybody wants to take their interest to a higher level, I do have a website as well, paulstonesports.org. Again, that's paulstonesports.org.
On your way out, who wins it all?
I like Ohio State. I think if Will Howard can take care of the football, I've said all year they've got the best team in the nation. If you just count 21 of the 22 positions, so if he can just hold serve, I like Ohio State. And you might sprinkle a little bit on Notre Dame. They were 12-1. They're now maybe 8-1. I think Notre Dame, this is a wide open year. Anybody could win. Somebody might come from slightly off the pace. That team could be Notre Dame.
That's wonderful, Paul. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll be talking soon. You have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.